my soccer universe. My name is Roland. This is Football Talk, and what an interesting weekend this was. We had a couple of really big games, I have to say. I mean, one, probably the biggest game of them all with the Clásico, who actually has a nasty edge to it, which I thought was quite interesting. But there were also some other big matches, especially in the Netherlands. There was a huge clash as well. There was one in Italy, of course, that also has quite some reverberations. And then there were some other really interesting results, looking especially at the Premier League, looking especially at the two biggest teams, if you would like, in United and Liverpool. One positive, one negative, where you really have to start to ask yourself some questions. We'll talk all about that in this episode here. This time, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's an audio-only episode. It was just better and shorter for me to do it this way and to get the episode out a little bit sooner, especially since we have a cup round or cup midweek coming up. Yes, the Serie A and Ligue do have some midweek league fixtures, but it's a whole lot of cup action. And I'm planning to talk about that on Friday as well. And let's see if I keep it with the audio-only format or you will see me in video as well. I will try to make it, if you're watching this on YouTube, a little bit more palatable as a video, so you get all the information on there too, and a little bit more to look at as well. But you know, it was always meant to be a podcast, and therefore I don't regret making it audio only, especially if it makes it a little bit simpler for me. Personally, what do I think about this weekend? Well, I always look at my two favorite teams and I call it a 4-point weekend. Both teams faced the last place team in their league, Milan, a disappointing 2-2 draw, which we also will have to address already on Friday evening. But LASK got a very difficult 1-0 win. Not much to talk home about, except it was a 1-0 home win. But suddenly you're full back in the chase for the top 6, which is something that even 2 weeks ago I wouldn't necessarily have expected. And I still don't really like talking about it because, you know, we have been so bad before that. Let's stay with feet solidly on the ground. Let's look at it pragmatically. And that was that. Given that it was such a big weekend, I actually wanna not start with Austria this time around. I would say let's start with the big clash over in Madrid. Okay, Clasico, and this one had a little bit of a nasty prelude with, you know, a throwaway comment by Lamine Yamal on YouTube got blown out of the proportion in the Madrid media, as they want to do. And I have to say, while it was probably not right to blow this out of proportion, this is all that Real Madrid needed to actually get really going in this match, even though Xabi Alonso tried to play this down as much as possible, at least publicly. But yeah, it shows the inexperience of Lamine Yamal once again, and he didn't have a great Clásico, I have to say, although he created one good chance. Real Madrid fully deservedly won this one, especially in the first half. I thought they're gonna eat Barcelona, even though Barcelona were pressing. I mean, it was quite interesting, but you could see that the backline of Barcelona really got under pressure, especially since the front line did not actually exert the pressure as is usual when they have Rafinha playing. And, you know, Mbappe, or in the 12th minute, seemingly scored the opener after a penalty that was given, was fortunately not given and called back. Yamal did not trip up Vini. It was the other way around. I think it should have been just a simply play on, nothing more. But, you know, I have to give it to the refs. It was a high-pressure environment, and they actually handled it quite well. Even the offside goal that Mbappe then scores in the 12th minute, man, what a great shot. This would have been a wonderful goal. You could see that he has now full confidence that he has arrived at Real Madrid, and the way he scores it was brilliantly taken, and then it was just a few millimeters offside. That was a little bit odd to see, I gotta say. But, you know, he opens in the scoring at 22nd minute, being assisted by Bellingham. A Bellingham that is now retreating more into this offensive midfield role, which also works well for Real Madrid. You know, that everyone has their own role. This is what Xabi Alonso has done quite well. Overall, I always felt that Barcelona were on the back foot, and it was only here and there some counterattacks. Only when Fermin Lopez had equalized after a nice Rashford assist, I thought, is this now what Barcelona need to get back into the game? Well, I mean, if you forget the Militao on the back post and Bellingham can tap it home more or less in the 43rd minute, you knew that Barcelona is in trouble. There was even more trouble. Yeah, we can discuss the penalty in the second half. Eric Garcia touches with the hand. When I saw the replays, yes, it is not much, and ideally I wouldn't want to see it given, but you see a clear movement of the hand towards the ball. Therefore, I can see why it is given. However, Szczesny actually does save it and keeps Barcelona in the game. And then I have to say, the first half was rather exciting. While Real Madrid dominated it, I also felt that, with some luck, Barcelona could have done something. But then second half, it fell a little bit asleep. I don't think that Real Madrid created that many chances anymore. And there was not much coming from Barcelona, except I think once they had a 3-on-2 with Fermin, then opting to take a shot from outside the box when he has both of his attackers to the left and to the right. That was not good. Jules Koundé just needs to convert the Yamal cross. But in the end, it was a deserved win for Real Madrid. And yes, there are some other stories. We had Vinny Jr. coming off, causing all kinds of trouble. Then Carvajal and Lamine Yamal had a little altercation because Carvajal made the "you talk too much" gesture, blah, blah, blah. The temperature needs to come down on all that stuff, but especially Lamine Yamal. I know he has kind of a prickly character in a way. He likes to taunt. That I've already realized. Also something that doesn't really endear him too much to me, even though I think he's an outstanding player. But I think with that, he took himself out of the game as well. It was also a massive win for Real Madrid, not in terms of the table, because now you have a pretty good cushion over Barcelona, but also because so far in the big games they have not performed. This is the first big game that they won. And yes, Barcelona's front line is not what it used to be. It was only Yamal in there. I mean, Rashford and Fermin, no Rafinha and no Lewandowski, although maybe Fermin can step in there. But yeah, big win for Barcelona. What else did we have in Spain? We had a vital win for Real Sociedad over Sevilla, moving out of the relegation zone. A little bit weird. Sevilla now, after this great win over Barcelona, suddenly not performing well again. Then we had also bottom of the table Clásico between Real Oviedo, not Madrid. It goes so, it normally rolls Real and you say Madrid. No, it's Real Oviedo against Girona, so also Real against the Catalan team. Oviedo had a 2-0 lead, however, were then 3-2 down in stoppage time and managed a 3-3 draw. Absolute mad game. Espanyol hand Elche the second defeat of the season, and they are now sitting in 5th place, were sitting yesterday even in 4th place, so having a really, really good season. Getafe beat Athletic Club. That was a bit of a surprising result. The Valencian derby ends with a 2-0 for Villarreal. I thought the game was relatively even the first half, but as soon as Villarreal then scored the goal, it was only going one way, and a lot of displeasure with the Valencia performance. The only positive I can say is those beautiful jerseys Valencia were wearing. We had also Celta Vigo getting their first win of the season after a host of draws. A 3-2 away win at Osasuna, late goal winning that one. Nice assist from Barry Aspas. Rayo also keeping up there. Betis though suffered 2-0 home defeat yesterday in the evening, with Atletico Madrid getting the job done early through Giuliano and Baena. Then in the 45th minute, making it a 2-0 scoreline, and so Atleti stay in 4th place. Next up, let's talk a bit about Serie A. We're still staying away from the Austrian Bundesliga coming next, but Serie A is the one that started first for me the weekend with the disappointing draw, 2-2 draw at home between Milan and Pisa. You can see that the injury crisis has really hit Milan during the international break, with 5 in part really important players like Rabiot, Pulisic, also Estupinian out, and so the squad is really, really, really thin. Well, you play against last place Pisa, so you actually hope that you get an easy win and stay top of the table already on Friday. Alas, it was not meant to be. Rafa Leao did score early with another shot from outside of the box. I thought everything is gonna go easy. I think the Milan players also thought. They actually let it slide a little bit. And this is one thing that I think Allegri probably didn't like all that much. It was more like, yeah, if we play, we get maybe the goal, but there is no danger coming from Pisa. In the halftime, changes were made. Quadrado was brought on, Calabresi was brought on, and you give away a stupid penalty. Quadrado takes a shot that is blocked, I think, by De Winter with his hand. I hate that this is a penalty, but by the current rules, this is a penalty. Even he's turning away from it. In any case, Quadrado converts in 60th minute, and then the pressure is on. Milan did have good chances. I mean, Rafa Leao hit once the post where he just has to bury it, and the same thing can then be said for Nkunku. He came on the 76th minute for Jimenez. Also had a pretty big chance that you just have to convert. So I want to say overall the chances were there for Milan to actually win it again, which is very similar to the opening day defeat to Cremonese. However, similar, again, it was a long ball by Akan Samiro that finds Nzola. Yes, there was Gabbia pushed down on the ground by the attacker, but overall I think he would not have gotten Nzola, and Nzola can just convert, and it's 2-1 for Pisa in the 86th minute, and you really fear the worst. And there was really not much coming from Milan until Atacame just takes a shot from the edge of the box. And while the keeper for Pisa was, I think Schemper was his name, did really well up until that. This was a shot that he probably has to save, but it goes via the inside of the post in completely out of the blue. And suddenly, and with a very generous stoppage time, that was for 6 minutes, and it got extended, I think, for 3 more minutes, probably because of the goal celebration. And probably some bias towards the big name team. The chances were then there, and the biggest one came through Salemakas, who could have won it at the death with a really nice attacking move. However, his shot crawls away from the goal and not towards the goal. And so it ends with a disappointing 2-2 draw that actually left Milan vulnerable to relinquish their lead on top of the table. I mean, that early in the season, it's not a big deal, but it is definitely points dropped. And it didn't feel good, just showed some character. And I have to say that the crowd actually did not boo Milan. There's quite some positive feelings about Milan, which actually has me also in good spirits. Napoli then grabbed top spot from Milan with a 3-1, surprising 3-1 win over Inter. I mean, going into this game, we had, if you just look at the Champions League performances, Inter winning easily at Union Saint-Gilloise 4-0, whereas Napoli got trounced 6-2 at PSV Eindhoven. And, Saint-Gilloise have beaten PSV to start the Champions League. So, it's not that those two are unequal teams. So, for me, and also with the form that Inter came into this game, for me it was clear that they should be the favorites, and they actually played like favorites in that game. It wasn't just a super contentious penalty call. It probably wasn't a penalty. The referee said it wasn't a penalty. Then the linesman says it was a penalty, and then VAR cannot do much. And those referees, of course, are not duly banned because it was a so-called penaltito, very little penalty, really contentious. But then the drama. I mean, De Bruyne converts the penalty, but while shooting the penalty, he pulls his hamstring. He's probably out for a while, which at first you would think is probably not good for Napoli because he's a creative force on the other side. Conte hasn't really found the balance and how to integrate De Bruyne into this team. So there might be a blessing in disguise, but injuries are a problem for Napoli. So Inter already on the back foot there, not deserving to be 1-0 down. They were the better team. They created more chances. However, in the second half, it was a long ball by Spinazzola that McTominay, I mean, even if he didn't see the ball, because, if you go against the floodlights, he just one-times it more or less than into the net. Wonderful, great shot, and it's 2-0 for Napoli, and the writing was on the wall. Yes, Çalhanoğlu can then also convert with a penalty just 5 minutes later to keep Inter in the game, but at that moment, Inter have already lost their nerve. Conte really got under their skin. Anguissa in the 67th makes it 3-1. There was only one winner. And then the whole bust-up between Lautaro and Conte happening. It is the Pazza Inter that, the Inter that can look dominating at one point, but also is very nervy overall. And that probably doesn't bode well for them in this title race. Although, again, Inter probably have the best squad. And now it's down how Kivu can settle that one. Other results I want to point out, Cremonese managed 1-1 at home against Atalanta. Atalanta, one of the few still unbeaten teams in Europe. Yes, there's Bayern Munich, there's Atalanta if you look only at the top teams. However, Atalanta have 6 draws. Get another draw, a 1-1 at Cremonese. And of course, the story is Jamie Vardy scores his first goal for Cremonese. Brescianini in the 84th minute gets the equalizer. So 2 goals that came relatively late on. Honestly, I didn't really watch that game. Then we had Roma joining Napoli on top of the table with a 1-0 away win. Dybala scoring the goal at Sassuolo, a Sassuolo team that probably will have not much to do with relegation. The Apennine derby between Fiorentina and Bologna was also interesting because Bologna in the 52nd minute had a 2-0 lead, and then Dalinga in the 66th makes it 3-0. However, the goal was called off for an offside at a point where many Fiorentina fans already left the stadium under protest. However, then it's 2 penalties by Gudmundsson and Ken that salvage a draw for Fiorentina, lifeline for Pioli. We already heard that the sporting director, I think, came out to say that it's more his fault and not Pioli's fault, and Pioli can only do what the sporting director has given him. Yeah, the club leadership is under pressure in Florence. It's the worst start ever to a season, and they were really actually hoping to do better, but at the moment with only 4 points out of 8 games, they're sitting very close to the bottom of the table. The only positive is the stadium is slowly taking shape. And yes, their 2-2 draw was definitely also helped by a yellow-red card for Holm in the 83rd minute. And then a very consequential evening game on Sunday between Lazio and Juventus. Basic scoring or in the 9th minute. First half, I really thought that Lazio were better. Again, Juventus rather defensive, even though Tudor tried then to play the new signings as well. Didn't work at all. And Juventus lose a 3rd league game in a row. Now, lose now 3 games in a row. Don't look good. Ever since they've beaten Inter in this crazy game, they have not won anymore and they look rather unsustainable. And of course, Tudor got the sack, which is something that rarely, if ever, happens at Juventus. But there was a lot of bad blood already between sporting director, club leadership, and Igor Tudor. Igor Tudor was not happy with the signings at all. And so I guess he was probably even relieved to leave Juventus, even though he's a Juventus icon. The writing was on the wall there, and you know, if you don't play Kenan Yildiz, your best player from the beginning, I know he probably is also overplayed. It just doesn't look good. This is an absolutely atrocious Juventus side at the moment, and like with many other teams, it's not the coaching that lets Juventus down, it's the club leadership. And yeah, I have seen the parallels between Juventus and Ferrari. Both are losing or cannot win championships anymore ever since the Agnelli family is not fully involved anymore. And yeah, there are major questions to be asked overall. Okay, let's go to a very surprising round in the Austrian Bundesliga, where I was, of course, at the game between LASK and GAK. While this might not sound very exciting, this is a traditional duel. These are the 2 oldest teams, not from Vienna in Austria. So there's a long history and quite a contentious history between those 2 as well. It was clear from the get-go that this will be a game very dissimilar to the one that LASK won against Rapid the weekend prior after getting new coach Didi Kübauer, because this is a game where you will have the ball and you will need to break down the defense, and GRK really was only there to defend. What I can say though is that LASK actually looked with a much better body language. You could see there's some confidence in there, and especially for the first 15 minutes they tried to create chances, but this is really hard to break down, especially with the current squad and with some big name strikers missing. Break down that defense, but you were fairly in control until a little bit more rain and wind came in, and then it got ugly. There was also one situation where you had to clear the ball via the post that could have gone the wrong way. Would have gone the wrong way, I would argue, even 2 or 3 weeks ago when we were actually in a funk before Coach Kübauer took over. Second half, honestly, was not a great game. It was rather messy. There were some free kicks in there that missed the target. In the end, it's a cross by Usor, that the smallest player on the field. I mean, it was a cross that, a striker, a tall striker would probably volley. But the only one that could get there was little Sasha Horvath with all his 168 centimeters of height. And he heads it in. Kind of jumping into the corner. He said it was head, shoulder, everything. It's the 1-0 relatively, I think, 71st minute. Then GRK needed to come to get potentially points again. They have not won this whole season, but they couldn't really manage any chances, but LASK neither. And this is probably the one thing, because you thought now everything's open and you can dart in there. Did not really happen. That was probably the one downside of the whole thing. In any case, 3 points and every other result going your way means that it's now really, really tight in the race for the top 6. But even when we look at the other results, the table is absolutely tight. I mean, between the 1st and the 11th are 11 points. That is super, super, super tight. And there's only a top 4. And then there is a 7-team group within 6 points, and then GRK is also relatively on the bottom. Let's go through the games. Hartberg again throw away a lead late. They had in the 86th minute a 2-0 lead, fully deserved at Altach. However, Altach bring on 2 new players and they manage an equalizer. So again, Hartberg dropping points. If the game was only played until the 75th minute, Hartberg would be in the top 3. And I think even in an XG table that doesn't account for any draws, Hartberg would be leading. Tells you how unlucky, youthful, however you want to say, they are. Huge relief for me as a LASK fan was, of course, Tirol beating Blau-Weiß Linz ahead of the derby, although this might actually ignite them a little bit more. But this is also a big win for Tirol, who have been playing well but did not get the points. Now they open up a 6-point cushion over GRK, whereas Blau-Weiß, hanging now towards the bottom. But they have a striking line that is actually quite fearsome, I have to say. I expected Ried, who have been playing really good as of late, to actually cause Rapid some trouble, and they probably should have taken the lead. However, Rapid made a coach at the goalie position and they kept him in the game, and then Wurmbrand with a solo and a shot in the near corner gives them the lead, and then Kara with an equally beautiful goal makes it 2-0 just before the half. And yes, Ried had plenty of chances to actually get something more out of the game. However, Rapid, after a long losing streak, I think 5 games in all competitions, lost in a row, are back and get a win and are suddenly only within a point of the top of the table, because Sturm Graz lose at home to Wolfsburg. Yes, goalie did not look good, and I already said a whole lot about how bad the Austrian Bundesliga is in Europe. However, Zukic, Piesinger, and here their reserve goalie didn't look good, and the Renner open up a 3-0 halftime lead. Ronsga then pulls one back, and then Baumgartner sent off very contentiously again. It was a second yellow card where he clearly played the ball to clear it for a corner. He gets a second yellow card. He even says, please give me a straight red that you can have to look at it. Fortunately, his suspension has been lifted. And then Austria Vienna does what Austria Vienna always does against Salzburg, and even a change in jerseys. They were playing in the black new jerseys. You can see it a little bit in my Austrian jersey Bundesliga review. They lose 3-0, and Salzburg played some really nice stuff, and it's also, I don't want to say against all expectations, because Austria Vienna usually do lose against Salzburg, but Salzburg would have been there for the taking, but Austria Vienna only played nice until the box, where Salzburg actually finished their chances, and Kitano was the player of the game. Ale Begovic scored one, and then young Austrian Trummer gets a beautiful third goal, lobbing the goalkeeper. Scoreline probably too high, but Salzburg now level on points with Sturm Graz. However, Sturm Graz at the halftime of the regular season have a game in hand against WSG Tirol at home, so that might be a little bit misleading how tight it is in the table, but you never know. If Tirol win that game, then suddenly they are in the top 6. It is that tight in Austria. Let's move over to the Netherlands, where we had actually a big fixture weekend with one really sticking out. It was Feyenoord against PSV. But before that, we had Twente against Ajax. And if you've seen anything about Ajax as of late, Ajax are in terrible form. they don't look good and don't look right and were outplayed in the first half by 20. They should have led by way more than the fourth minute goal by Hlinson. And it was then really against the run of play when within 10 minutes of the restart of the second half, Ajax scored 3 goals out of nowhere. I mean, Wout Weghorst gets an equalizer, Oscar Gloch with a really nice shot makes it 2-1 for Ajax, and Kutz makes it in the 56th suddenly 3-2. Totally out of nowhere, and against the run of play, Ajax had the lead. Van Wolfswinkel pulls one back with a penalty, however, missed also quite a few chances, and Twente tried to at least salvage a draw, but it was not meant to be. And so this was definitely points dropped. Lucky win for Ajax. Heitinga still in the coaching seat. However, it's a very, very hot coaching seat. I guess Ajax do have the trouble that the club leadership also doesn't know where Ajax really stand. Also some financial trouble in there. And even though Erik ten Hag was in the stands, I actually have some doubts whether they can afford an Erik ten Hag now that he has been a coach at United. The big game, of course, was Feyenoord against PSV. It was decided by one man. Saibari scores a hat-trick, and there were some really great goals in there. I mean, his first one was already an unlikely shot, but especially when Valente just had equalized for Feyenoord. A minute later, he re-establishes the lead against Feyenoord with a nice run and then a thunderous shot into the near upper corner. Absolutely amazing goal. And then just in the 60th minute, 9 minutes later, he makes it 3-1. Yes, Feyenoord can pull one back, but overall PSV were the better team. They are now level on top of the table with Feyenoord, however, thanks to goal difference. And this is where the big win for Feyenoord last weekend did count so much. Feyenoord are still top. This was their first loss, but identical records between them and PSV, and Feyenoord have to figure out how to beat PSV if they want to claim this championship, because otherwise Feyenoord have been really good in this league. The question is, of course, Feyenoord play in the Europa League, whereas PSV play in the Champions League, if that won't have an impact overall. And then we also had AZ taking on Utrecht. AZ was a disappointment last season. Utrecht was one of the surprise teams. Now it's a little bit reverse. Utrecht, after beating Ajax last weekend, get also a very convincing 4-1 win over Utrecht. Troy Perrault scoring a brace in the first half and missing a penalty to make it 4-0, but in the end it ends in a 4-1 win. Of course, we need to also talk about this absolutely mad Premier League weekend where the only constant is that Arsenal stay top with a typical Arsenal performance. Arsenal to Arsenal don't win excitingly 1-0 over Crystal Palace. And of course, former Crystal Palace player Eberechi Eze is winning 1-0, and after Palace was such a great form in this year, suddenly they have kind of a little bit of a losing streak going, which is also curious to see. But if we look now at the top 4 before we talk about any further games, it makes for rather strange reading. We have Arsenal, that we would expect them. Bournemouth, never heard of them before. Tottenham and Sunderland. Now, I have, of course, heard about Bournemouth, but it is in these upper echelons, it's a very, very weird table, but it's also relatively tied together. Also, and we'll come to that, United ahead of Liverpool. How did that happen? And City and Villa are close and Chelsea only 9th. It's a really strange world that we're currently in the Premier League. The only constant is that Arsenal are dominant and are probably waltzing to a title, unless they get hit by the injury bug, and maybe it will go the other way. As I said, I want to point out a few results. I mean, early on already, we had Sunderland beating Chelsea at Stamford Bridge 2-1 with a winner by Talbe in the 93rd minute. Sunderland is one of the big surprises. They have Granit Xhaka in there who kind of keeps everything together, and he's a great leader for a team. Especially, we had seen it at Leverkusen, not so much at Arsenal, but I can see that his leadership is exactly what maybe an inexperienced team like Sunderland would need. The question is, can they keep it up? But a sensational start to their season, and I have talked way too little about Sunderland so far. United also, and that came a little bit as a surprise to me. Now they have 3 wins in a row. Where did also that come from? Well, with Cunha and Mbeumo, you have probably strikers up front that are a little bit more Premier League proven, a little bit more confidence, and also they have now a goalkeeper that is actually not messing up things. So there's also some solidity there, and maybe slowly the system is actually working. Cunha, Casemiro and Mbeumo had given a 3-0 lead to United by the 61st minute. Yes, well back, and Cazorla's pull 2 back in the stoppage time. It was 3-2, so some nervy late moments, but Mbeumo just 4 minutes later secures the deal for United. That is something that we did not see coming, because United, I don't know. And then Liverpool go to Brentford and were outsmarted. And this was a rather flat Liverpool performance. The only positive thing I can say about this performance, even though they played badly, they scored 2 goals and were in the game until late. However, the 2-1 at the half was rather flattering. I mean, Ouattara and Schade had opened the 2-0 lead. Kerkes then with his first goal for Liverpool pulls one back. But as soon as this penalty that was given away by Van Dijk, and you know, the problems for Liverpool start at the back with Van Dijk and Konate not really playing well. Then Slot, you know, it looks a little bit like an all-star team that just has to find its way, or I don't know, Mohamed Salah, all these great players from last season, are they just, you know, too satisfied with themselves? The new players probably need some leadership. It's a little bit going back and forth, and it does not quite work yet. I just hope that, you know, maybe Slot should try to settle on a starting 11 and let them play into form. But if I look at the upcoming games, might not look easy for Liverpool, and we could soon talk about a veritable crisis. And then I want to see how ready are Liverpool to make a change, or how ready they are to stick out with Arne Slot, who did such a good work last season. But in this form, Liverpool now only in 7th place and trending downwards. We were talking about Arsenal's 1-0 win over Crystal Palace. Not really surprising. Surprising was definitely Aston Villa beating City 1-0. I also thought that City is a team that was forming and actually was already finding some form, and suddenly they lose to Aston Villa, a team that had a hard time winning to start the season, but now are climbing up the table and look a little bit like the Villa of old. Unai Emery have made the turnaround. Matty Cash on in 90th minute scoring the winner. A late Holland equalizer was then ruled out for offside. Huge win for Villa, and keeps them kind of in the running for these European spots. And we know there are all kinds of cups that can be won that will increase the tally. English teams are of course favorites also to win in Europe. So I would say a European return for Aston Villa is definitely not unlikely. Bournemouth stormed into 2nd place thanks to a 2-0 win over now coached by Jean Dyche Nottingham Forest. Maybe looked better already, but there's already a gap, a 3-point gap to Fulham, who sit just ahead of them in the table. And if I look just at the bottom of the table, Forest, West Ham and Wolves, I think all of them were hoping that the promoted teams will not do well, but it will this time catch a established Premier League side, at least one, if not 2 or 3, because the promoted teams are all doing really well, with only Burnley kind of sitting near the relegation zone. Leeds also, 11 and 10 points, but Sunderland is really, really, really good. And then also in 3rd place is Spurs, a team that is so, not really settled overall, but they get a 3-0 away win at the new Everton Stadium, with Van de Ven scoring a brace in the first half. And yes, this was a much closer game than the final scoreline would suggest, but Spurs away from home do get the results. At home, I hear maybe the problem is that the fans would expect them to play more dominant, whereas away from home, that's not really expected. And so Spurs are doing much better away from home. Let's run through the remaining leagues rather quickly, because I have not watched too much in these. I want to actually start for once with this final stretch in Portugal, where, all the big teams got wins with the exception of Vitória, but they had also a rocky start to the season. So maybe we shouldn't count them as a top team anymore. Maybe top team Gil Vicente sitting in 4th place ahead of Famalicão, and, in touching distance to the big 3. Benfica for the first time got a big win under Jose Mourinho, and and it's win a 5-0 over Arouca. But this Arouca team also sits towards the bottom of the table, so not much that you can tell. Famalicão, as I said, is up there, beating Vitoria 2-0. Sporting get a 3-0 away win at Tondela, and another team that is threatened by relegation, as is Casapia, who lose 4-0 at Braga. Braga also a little bit off the pace, but I actually think they will make the turnaround. And then Sporting were actually probably hoping that Porto drop points. Nah, they are not dropping points. They get a late winner, so win 2-1 at Moreirense. After lauding Marseille over the past few weeks so much, I think I've given them a little bit of kiss of death, because their performance at Lens allowed PSG to retake the lead. Hakimi scoring a brace in Brest, 2-0 halftime lead. Desiree Doué adds a third one. Easy peasy, whereas Marseille managed to lose 2-1 at Lens despite having a 1-0 lead through Greenwood in the 70th minute. However, Lens were overall the better team, and then Pavard completely imploding, also scoring an own goal in the process. 53rd minute, Marseille cannot find an equalizer. Lens now overtaking Marseille and sitting relatively comfortable also in the table at 19 points ahead of Marseille with 18, PSG with 20. So it's relatively tight up top, and Lens probably one of the surprise teams so far, as is the fourth place team, level on point with Marseille. So the two Olympic teams together, who also get a comeback win at home against a team in Strasbourg that also has performing really well as of late. Panicelli, the man of the hour, gets the go-ahead goal for Strasbourg. However, Doucouré own goal manages a 1-1 at the half-time. Tolisso misses then a penalty for Lyon in the first half. Doucouré is sent off. Moreira gets the winner late on, and so Lyon slowly being up there as well. Something after all the trouble and all they almost have been relegated last season, staying in there and are potentially qualifying for the Champions League. We also have to mention the results of the other two big teams. Lille get a very resounding 6-1 win over Metz, and Monaco 1-0 over Toulouse. And let's finish in Germany with the Bundesliga, where Bayern remain top of the table, very dominant. Yes, they had a little bit trouble against last place Gladbach. As Gladbach were reduced to 10 men, they had to break down the wall, but once they did, it was only going one way. And there is this little Leonard Karl guy that is becoming a little bit of a sensation for Bayern as well. So Bayern still perfect, 8 wins in the first 8 games of the season. It's something that only Milan have managed in the 90s. The one thing that would speak for Milan is that Serie A in the early 90s under Fabio Capello, when Milan was playing under Fabio Capello, was a way more competitive league than the Bundesliga is currently. Bayern are not ahead of Dortmund. No, it is Leipzig who get a 6-0 away win at Augsburg. An Augsburg team that looks now precariously close to the relegation zone, and I think there might be change also coming relatively soon. Stuttgart getting a late 2-1 win over Mainz. A Mainz team is also battling against relegation, but I think finding a little bit their form. Leverkusen beat Freiburg in a European duel. Dortmund get a rather unforced 1-0 win over Köln. A Köln team that now, after their good start to the season, is probably a little bit more regressing towards the mean. As his highest foul, who have a little bit of tougher time, losing now 1-0 at home to Wolfsburg. Lastly, I also want to note that Frankfurt can also manage to not concede goals. 2-0 at home to St. Pauli, and therefore they're also in the race for the European spots. Okay, this ends this audio-only edition of My Soccer Universe Football Talk. Let me know which results did grab you the most on this past weekend. How did your team perform? Were you happy with the results? And where do you think the leagues are going? As always, I would always be happy if you could subscribe to this podcast, either YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you can find me. You can also use the RSS link below. And I would really love it if you could tell a friend that we can grow this community. I saw that growth has been slowing a little bit. So yeah, please keep it growing to keep me motivated to producing this, because I actually like doing them. But if I don't see much public for that, I might have to rethink things. But we'll see about that. In any case, enjoy the games. And as always, I will talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye.